The world is changing faster than ever before. In the past 10 years, there has been an exponential technological evolution, the kind of technology that has revolutionized the world of work as we know it.
The Lawyers Hub was founded on the principle that law needs to interact more with technology, and that greatly affects tech policy as well as access to justice. So the Lawyers Hub exists as a confluence between law and technology, working on tech policy, on emerging technologies, as well as increasing and upskilling the knowledge of lawyers in the area of technology. We support tech startups as well to ensure that the tech ecosystem also engages in policy, but as well understand the issues around data protection, issues that also concern their structure, as well as intellectual property.
If you look at the evolution of technology, it's been relegated as an alternative in most systems. But the realization that 21st century has brought us into is that technology has to be an integral part of our day-to-day systems. And if you look at some critical technology areas like artificial intelligence, blockchain, nanotechnology, biotechnology, then it gives us a strong indication that if we do not start having discussions on the use of these technology areas, as far as law is concerned, then we may be in some kind of trouble. So Lawyers Hub is leading the debate on the use of these technologies, especially in Africa.
Over the years, the Lawyers Hub has supported the innovation ecosystem, convened events such as the Africa Law Tech Festival and the Global Legal Hackathon. The Lawyers Hub has also supported government innovations within the justice sector, as well as trained government institutions and more than 10,000 lawyers across Africa on emerging tech policy.
Our dream at the Lawyers Hub is to have open access to law. We envision a continent where there is access to justice through leveraging technology and with a crowd of enlightened lawyers. We see a continent that also protects its own through better tech policies, that emerging technologies, through its regulation, will offer better value and consumer protection for the people within Kenya and within the African continent. We envision that we will convene policy makers, regulators, as well as lawyers who are more enlightened on emerging technologies and with better digital skills. And we invite you to be a part of this great vision for Kenya and for Africa.
Good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Good morning, good evening. I don't know where you're joining us from this afternoon, 12 o'clock in Nairobi. It's still morning in Ghana. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Linda Bonyo. I am the founder of the Lawyers Hub, and I'll be your moderator today. We have a very interesting panel coming up, but also a very interesting discussion today on Ghana's AI strategy, 2025 to 2035. That's a 10-year strategy. So Ghana launched a 10-year strategy, which is long in the continent. A lot of the strategies have been 5-year strategies, and Ghana has launched this 2025 to 2035. Somebody said a day in AI is like pre-internet era, 15 years. And so I'm curious to hear what everyone thinks about a 10-year strategy and whether it will be, taken up or disrupted by what we're already going through in the world. And so as we proceed, I'd like to talk about the definitions within the Ghana's AI strategy. The strategy has 8 pillars as a structure. So there's 4 enablers. That's the foundations on data, infrastructure, talent, ethics, plus 4 accelerators. So the accelerators are on research sectors, investment, also the AI authority. So the taxonomy slide is deliberate. The strategy distinguishes artificial intelligence, machine learning, and NLP because Ghana has staked a national niche on NLP, natural language processing. So I'd want us to talk about that as well. That choice shows up later in the NLP Center of Excellence that they set up in the strategy that talks about the local languages on Twi, Ewe, Ga, Dagbani, and Hosa work. And then, of course, it's until 2025, but with phased milestones at 2027 and 2030. So why do they have like 8 pillars and not 5 or 12? The structure really mirrors UNESCO's RAM categories and also Singapore's NAIS architecture, which is adopted for Ghana's resource base. So we look at what are the, why UNESCO? We saw that UNESCO also helps with Zimbabwe, but also Kenya chose GIZ. So there's been different people who are building this strategy. I must also say that the Future Society was part of drafting this particular bill. So is this a plan or an aspiration? The strategy commits to real numbers, like a 5 billion Cedi fund, 1 million trained youth, but it also names targets without really mentioning who's going to pay for it. So we'll get to that when you go to like slide 7. So is delivery going to be possible, or it's just this piece of paper that we talk about? So on slide 2, we look at this bold continental vision, like is it possible to actually implement this particular strategy? So the vision statement is generally ambitious. Ghana is positioning itself as Africa's AI hub. They've actually said they want to mirror AFCFTA, which is actually located in Ghana. So they want to be Africa's AI hub and form an AFCA sort of, body. They have set up a responsible AI authority, which will sit at the center of this governance. So I want to give you like this 2 halves of the same picture, what the strategy commits and what, you could say that the African AI policy community will be able to flag. So it talks about 500 billion cedis to GDP by 2035. So that's something economic, but that number, ideally, we need to see who funds it. That's the investment target. Then you have 1 million AI-ready youth by 2023. So that's the workforce target. So 2 years ahead of the GDP horizon. Then we talk about national compute by 2035. So that's, if you're wondering what FLOPS means, FLOPS stands for floating point operations per second. That's how you measure how many math calculations a computer can do every second. So you pronounce it as 10 to the 25th FLOPS. So for example, if you want to understand this, if every person on Earth did 1 math problem every second without stopping, it will take them about 40 million years to do what 10, to the power of 25th flops, what it looks like in the order of that magnitude. You require a lot of frontier AI training, you require electricity and energy. So Ghana is the most ambitious one on the continent about compute. So you're looking at compute versus energy. If we have enough grids, enough energy roadmaps, so that's one. But also sovereignty versus hyperscalers. So the plan within the strategy is to quote NVIDIA, Google, AWS, and Azure for credits while declaring data sovereignty. So that's a question we must look at, like, what are you doing with big tech, but also you're looking for independence, but also you're looking for big tech to come in and make the investments. Then it talks about the responsible AI authority. So the responsible AI authority is incubated inside the Data Protection Commission. So the Data Protection Commission is also actually put as an authority. So it's going to become a full commission, independent, but that is a question we have to talk about institutional infrastructure. How does that look like? Then it talks about foreign direct investments without anchor investors. And just so you know, Kenya already had people that were investing in the strategy before it was launched. Ghana has no such anchor investors. So they talk about the Global AI Summit, which Ghana will convene and position itself to close that funding gap. So also, we're looking at we can't look at these numbers in isolation. We must look at what's the regional and global positioning. So on this slide, I'm going to just talk about ECOWAS. We've been comparing what ECOWAS is doing in West Africa, what East Africa is doing, comparing it to Kenya and Rwanda, where Rwanda has positioned itself as the Africa's AI lab, but Kenya has positioned itself as we're going to be the skill place where everybody comes in to hire workers. Ethiopia has a standing AI institute, and Ghana's responsible AI authority mentions that they will be mirroring this to what is already done in Singapore and also already done in, they mentioned Egypt, I think, and Morocco. So that's something to look at. So Ghana is choosing depth over enforceability. So we're looking at enforceability questions. how will Ghana enforce this? And, why is Ghana at this particular point still behind countries like Rwanda that began institutional building in 2018 and Kenya in 2019? So we have to look at why the difference and what's unique to Ghana. And also, did Ghana adopt EU-style penalties? If you look at the strategy, the absence it looks like it's deliberate. Penalties without enforcement capacity, they create this regulatory risk without any compliance that you gain. So it looks like Ghana is planning to build institution capacity fast, and then now, get into enforcement, just like Kenya did with the Data Protection Act, where it focused on let's build the institution and then let's punish people later. So what about big tech and foreign workers? On this slide, I want to talk about, how different countries have been approaching big tech and foreign workers. So and foreign investors. So for example, in Kenya, it was very obvious that you open up the country, let investors bring the money, make visas something that's easy to work. So if you're a hyperscaler, a sovereign wealth fund, or a frontier lab, Ghana's strategy is inviting at least one private AGI lab into Ghanaian soil with 10 billion plus cedis of mixed funding behind it. It's benchmarked explicitly and mentions OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and DeepSeek. So that's the AGI lab that they are talking about. They also talk about 10 AI unicorns by 2035. So they want to build companies on top of these AGI labs frontier models. And they talk about legal, transport, health, and finance. Then they also talk about compute partnerships. It's very open. They will build, and they mention NVIDIA, Google, and AWS and Azure, as I had mentioned. So let's look at, if you're talking about data sovereignty, what does this look like? Ghana has taken the time in the strategy to talk about data access, how locals will access data, including the use of their Ghanaian card. So it does not just talk about data protection and governance, it also talks about data access, which is a really great provision. So they talk about open versus restricted data. Restricted data covers health, finance, and security. And they'll have cross-border AI training pipelines, which fall under this particular framework. And they have also gated data and said 80% of Ghanaian data sets is gated to citizens. And they hope for a trillion tokens of Ghanaian data by 2030, with 80% accessible only to verified Ghanaians via their Ghana card. Talk about procurement also. We've talked about public procurement of AI tools. So the procurement favors local AI. They have introduced the GhanaChat, where public tenders are open preferentially to startups with co-creation of intellectual property where it's required. So this strategy is asking foreign capital to come on Ghana's terms, and they promise them favorable conditions, including credits, duty exemptions, and sandbox access. So this is another country that has created a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox in that sense. So that's the deal. So anyway, who are these AGI lab partners? Still not mentioned, but we hope that this will be sorted at the Global Ghana AI Summit. So the question to ask is, are these data sovereignty rules, workable for big tech companies? We know how they do, but they say that this model is closer to Singapore's PDPA, than to GDPR. So where is Ghana leaning? It feels like Ghana is speaking things from everywhere, from the EU, from Singapore, and they mention it right within the strategy. What about startups and youths and MSMEs? I've talked about, incentives around startups, and they mentioned these incentives. For the first time, I was impressed that the incentive was tax. Kenya, where are you? This tax incentives, I think, for the youth is really commendable. We have an AI-ready Ghana, so that's one of the things they talk about in terms of instruments that will bring in this domestic ecosystem. So you have 1 million plus AI-ready youth by 2033, plus 10,000 mid to senior researchers. Integrated from year one of high school. So that's the workforce backbone. So they're going up to high schools. Then you have AI fellowships, and they place them in regional ICT hubs, coordinated with Girls in ICT program. Then they have the National AI Fund, which is 5 billion cedis, and we need to figure out where that is coming from. And then cloud and compute that we've talked about. So if you are A startup, you expect GPU, subsidies, seed grants, low interest loans through the Ghana digital centers. So they mention institutions like the Ghana Tech Lab, the Ghana NLP, Blossom Academy, Hyperspace, and ICOD. So what does this mean for also repatriated diaspora? Ghana is signaling that they want their people overseas. They want them back. And that also sounds just like Zimbabwe's strategy on diaspora. Let diaspora come home because they have a lot of what we would see. Then we also see that, the National AI Fund, they talk about it has to begin on year one, which is 2025, and also to fund it as a one-year deliverable. So how do you access this funding as a Ghanaian startups? So there are 3 doors, which is 1, the fund. So you can apply to the fund, grants and equity. 2, digital centers. You get compute and credit. And 3, procurement track. So you can procure and get government tenders from this. So let's talk about the sector applications. Different countries have actually shown which are their sectors. And Ghana has named a sovereign LLM called GhanaChat. So they're going to have, which is a first in Africa, they're going to have all the government data and information to be a sovereign LLM, and then they will name it GhanaChat. And within GhanaChat, you are then able to access government services, but also government information. So that's where they're going to begin. It's mandated for use across every ministry and fine-tuned for citizen services like tax filing, complete management, permits, and benefit applications. This is commendable. So it talks about the different ministry sector applications on healthcare, agriculture, financial services, transportation, environment, land, and resources. Many countries have always prioritized the 3: healthcare, agriculture, and education. So that's a little different from Ghana. But Ghana also talks about culture. This we saw with Ubuntu framework in South Africa, as well as in Zimbabwe. So they talk about natural language processing for Twi, for Ewe, for Ga, for Hosa, all the languages. So what's the difference between having this sovereign LLM rather than fine-tuning a foreign model? We'll get to discussions on that, on what we think. What about the financial instruments that we've mentioned? There's a national research fund that's tied in, and they've said that the mining and oil royalties will be routed through this existing national research fund. So that's good use of the mining and oil, royalties that are coming in. So we'd also want to see, like I mentioned before about having money before you launch. Kenya and Rwanda had this anchor donors before launching their strategies: the World Bank, GIZ, Gates Foundation, and USAID. So Ghana has mentioned these vehicles, but they've not disclosed who exactly is the person. So let's look at almost the final one on audits and ethics. So Ghana requires ethical impact assessments. It takes the UNESCO style ethical impact assessments on public sector AI procurement. So you have to cover bias, data governance, environmental impact. So the ethical impact assessment mirrors UNESCO. Then they have algorithmic accountability guidelines. So they talk about we must publish decision-making processes, data sources, impact. It's also applied to GhanaChat and all citizen-facing systems. This one is a new one because many governments exempt themselves from this algorithmic accountability guidelines. Then they also have a Data Protection Act compliance. So it's going to be elevated with the 16 regional officers and the inspectors. But also they talk about the cybersecurity law and say the Cybersecurity Act must be integrated with early warning systems for deepfakes, disinformation, and terrorism facilitation. That's a first on terrorism facilitation. So bias and fairness audits. So you have bias mitigation fund is proposed. AI ethics hubs in universities is also there as for auditing. This sort of mirrors what South Africa had proposed on the compensation fund, but this is an AI mitigation fund. Then you must have explainable AI in critical domains, and the critical domains are health, justice, and transportation. So explainable AI, which means also transparent. So anyway, who enforces this particular AI strategy? It's the Responsible AI Authority, which is put in the Data Protection Authority. So that's where we talk about, what do you call it? That's where you talk about independence. How independent is that, authority? Did we need more? But I must also mention that governance infrastructure, they have talked about where they're modeling this from. So they talk about Singapore, Egypt, but also mentioned the UK Office for AI. We talked about this UK Office for AI a few weeks ago and mentioned that it's a coordination office. So what you're trying to do is to coordinate rather than have new institution and incubate institutions within an existing institution, which is different from what Kenya was proposing on having an AI authority without, as a separate sort of authority. So that's the questions that we want to talk about today. Why is there no AI ombudsperson? We saw with Zimbabwe, you have an ombudsman who comes in and look at who's been harmed by artificial intelligence, where do we route these things? Two, also, there's no parliamentary oversight committee. This was proposed in the now defunct South Africa, national policy, to have a parliamentary oversight committee, that way that, they cover oversight. So having a dedicated AI committee may have helped in this case. So what are the implementation timelines? 2025, the Responsible AI Authority is established. You have AI Ready Ghana that launches, and the AI Fund also opens. 2027, infrastructure. So they're looking at compute capacity, and also they will have a National Deep Science Institute framework in place. 2030, they want to scale it. So they must have 200 billion cedis AI contribution to the GDP, which is very ambitious. And then you have 2035, Ghana gets to an AI-powered society. That is what the strategy talks about. So we have so many questions, so many things to look at. It took a lot of time, but this is supposed to be informative, to let you know what the strategy actually says, and then we can discuss from a point of knowledge. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. My name is Linda, and I would want to invite my panel to talk about what stands out for them. Is this realistic? We know in Africa, we have the frameworks. We have each and everything that's really great, but where does it take us? What are the gaps and what do we do about this? Is it just nice on paper? Is it just funded by and drawn by really great consultants that have drawn these documents? Is this actually viable for Ghana? And so I would ask you, if you have any question, please put it on the Q&A chat. That's where you're supposed to, that's where I'll see it, because the chat really gets out of hand. But I also ask that you continue to engage. At the end, I'll give you an opportunity to ask a question. So let's start with our first speaker. And I am going to sort of, take it back to the structure and where we started. Feel free to speak your mind and get us going. So my first speaker today, I'm tempted to bring in Fifi first, especially because of the questions on compute, that Ghana has proposed. And I am going to introduce Fifi. If I pronounce your name wrongly, just forgive me. You've been my friend. He's a Google Cloud Platform trainer. He's a cloud solution architect and the founder of Cloudport Limited. He designs cloud-native infrastructure across IoT, fintech, and cloud sectors, and he advocates for technology entrepreneurship to bridge the AI compute divide in West Africa. If you read this strategy, it is so obvious that it's been written by technical people compared to Kenya, where lawyers take control, blah, blah. So you'd see these provisions on the natural language processing really having, a front seat. And we also see within you can see the tech communities that have been engaged. It's just not people who are talking about this. Ghana has taken the time to talk about data access, things that technologists like how do we get data? How do we have our own data? I'm curious to hear where you find this useful, places that you find that the strategy is wanting, and what can be done better. And what are the opportunities also? We're here to build businesses also and stop blaming big tech. Where do we see the opportunity and we can build something? So, Fifi, you have the next 5 minutes to let us know what you think.
Good morning, and thank you guys for having me. Thanks, Linda and the team. So the question is this realistic? On paper, is realistic. It sounds good. I think it's a well thought out strategy. Um, I haven't had time to fully digest and dissect it properly as you have. But from my initial observation, I think it's it's a good strategy. It sounds good. A lot of things have really been well thought through, in my opinion. Um, However, I think there are some gaps that certainly we need to take a look at. Currently, I think the major thing that stands out is the compute or energy to compute gap that we have in this strategy. Looking at what we are looking to achieve, it will certainly require a lot of energy. And as we stand, I mean, currently in 2026, I know this is supposed to be a 2025 to 2035, which probably means we've lost a year in terms of implementation. Um, Currently, we are deficient and we depend a lot on hydropower, which on its own is a bottleneck for such a strategy. And we need to look at diversifying in the first place the energy infrastructure. The compute target is very ambitious. Um, However, these energy constraints makes it a bit challenging. Can we really put in place all of these infrastructure in place before even building on top of these strategies? And also the human capital. Um, Training a lot of these people by 2033 won't necessarily mean we'll have the experts that we will require to actually implement the strategy. We have the risk of losing them, even though we are trying as much as possible to retain them or even bring back most of these people. Are we in the position to compensate them as much as big tech is providing? Already there, we have these big techs themselves fighting over talent. I think I saw Anthropic recently offering $570,000 a year for some of these smart brains. Are we really in the capacity to provide such intense incentives as well? So for me, on a very high level, while it's quite attractive, we have some of these gaps from the energy, from even the implementations, to retaining some of these people we end up training at the end of the day.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I wanted to understand the tech ecosystem in Ghana. I was in Ghana in, I think, 2018, when we had some of the tech conferences where we met. Google's AI lab, I think came in way early in the continent when a lot of us were not talking about artificial intelligence. And also, I think the call to diaspora. How bad is it with migration? Because I saw this with the Zimbabwe strategy, where the brains that are working on AI in Zimbabwe actually are abroad, and the government is clear on the strategy that you guys must come and build. So they have the come back home and build mantra. The strategy in Ghana does not mention, what they intend to do to bring these people back. Like, what are the specific incentives where we do this thing? I have other thoughts around it, but I'm just curious to know what is actually bedeviling the ecosystem that this strategy may want to fix.
Yeah. I mean, in order to bring these guys back home, right? Besides the monetary incentives, the ecosystem must be right for their businesses, first of all, for the environment, health, security, everything must be in place for them to want to come back home in the first place. And so there is a lot of work to do if we want to bring these guys back home. Um, it is even as a startup or a business, it's much more easier to service foreign businesses than local businesses. So there's a lot that goes into bringing people back home. The environment really must be conducive for them to bring back their entire family, for them to live here. You must have people willing to pay for the services at international rates, if I might say. Um, so it's just beyond, hey, come back home. What exactly are you doing to get them to come back home? Health, insurance, all of that. They must have that environment that they are used to because they left for a reason. What are you doing to get them back, to that, to what ecosystem are you building to attract them at the end of the day?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fifi. I appreciate you. And I must say that, the whole conversations about diaspora, Ghana had the year of return. And a lot of people who came back to Ghana were actually Black Americans who have found a home in Ghana, but they've also made things very expensive because they're earning in dollars. And so return, I don't know what return means in this sense, but thank you so much for highlighting that. You people have a great opportunity to agitate for tax reforms for startups because it's in the strategy. So I think the lawyers in Ghana, please support the tech startups to come up with drafts, do policy hackathons, come up with drafts of the tax regime that needs to be amended for startups to actually do well. So thank you so much, Fifi, for your time. As we continue, I would like to invite my second panelist who's going to talk about what they see in this particular strategy. I would like to invite Dr. Preeti Tega Edema. I hope I pronounce pretty, please forgive me. She is a lawyer and technology law lecturer at Admiralty University of Nigeria. She is the Education and Training Director of the Data Privacy Association of Nigeria, Executive Director of Privacy Law and Practice, and also a partner at PLPG Legal. She has authored 4 books on data privacy, researches technology law, AI, and digital rights, and is a fellow of the West African School of Internet Governance and the Africa Privacy Book Club. So she recently completed a certificate in the economics of AI at the University of Witwatersrand. And so I want to invite you to make a few comments as somebody looking in. What does this look like for you? And I also must mention to everyone else, this strategy came out on Friday night. I did not sleep. I spent the whole weekend reading. So today you will be gentle on my speakers because they actually had no time to prepare, but they've been on this particular work every day of their lives. And so, Dr. Preeti, I want to invite you to join us. Can you hear me? Don't worry, you don't have to have your video on if it's not working.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes,
Yes.
Linda, I can hear you. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Proceed.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I was trying to see if I can get my video up, but maybe I could just start. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me here. So first off, I would say that Ghana has taken a very laudable step in coming up with this AI strategy. Quite ambitious, very contains a lot of aspirational values, commendable provisions, right? Now, if we look at the statistics, okay, about AI in Africa, we'll find that first and foremost, there has been reports that no African country, right, as of in very recent time, surpassed a 20% AI adoption rate. Okay, so what that tells us is that there's still a lot of work to be done by African countries as far as AI adoption, as far as AI development and deployment is concerned. The Global AI Index reports, 2024 reports, states that African countries rank between 2 and 10%, the score rate for African countries when it comes to AI. Meanwhile, we have countries like the US ranking at 100%, China at 54%, Israel, I think above 50%, whereas African countries were usually ranking in single digits. So that tells us that there's still a lot of work that we need to do. Now, that's why I am pleased to know that Ghana has taken such a forward-thinking step, along with other countries like Nigeria, like Kenya, like Rwanda, that have rolled out AI strategy documents and draft policies. Like Nigeria has a draft national AI policy. I think that's been since 2023 or so. But beyond policies and draft documents, Linda has already taken us, giving a very excellent overview of the national AI, the strategy document, Ghana's strategy document. So I wouldn't want to delve into that. I would just want to highlight certain areas that stood out to me, and which I would want to say is really not particular to Ghana. It's if you look at almost all the other countries, African countries that have rolled out their AI policies, it's a trend, actually. So first and foremost, for me, as beautiful, drafted as the Ghana's national AI strategy document is, we want to consider enforcement, implementation, and we want to consider how exactly those aspirations and objectives contained in the strategy document will be achieved. Okay, and if we look at it from that lens, we want to look at what are actually the binding provisions in the strategy documents. Who is responsible for what? And if for any reason, there is a failure or there is a gap, right, in actualizing any of those provisions, what are the remedies? What steps can be taken, to address those gaps and those failures? That's where, for me, I think there is a very visible lacuna in the act, in the strategy document, because it's not an act. It's not a law. It is not even a bill. Okay. Now, what that means is that it is a beautifully written document, a policy document, as if you may, which will enable, legislative process to probably commence and may guide, the legislative process towards, if there's going to be a national AI law in Ghana, maybe in the nearest future, this draft strategy document could serve as, some sort of guide as to what provisions should be contained in that act, as it were. So right now, what we are seeing is that, yes, there are bodies that have been listed or mentioned in the draft, just as we have in Nigeria. We have the NIDA, the NIDA oversees the national AI draft policy we have currently in Nigeria. For Ghana, we have the Responsible AI Authority working together with the Data Protection Commission in Ghana, right? But again, we do not see where, for instance, if there has to be foreign direct investment, maybe together with tech hyperscalers, or even with other tech companies, right? What provisions, what laws would guide that sort of cooperation or that sort of collaboration or partnership? That for me is very critical, speaking from a legal point of view. Okay,
right?
Because you would need to have clear legal provisions that will state terms and conditions. Because when we talk about data sovereignty, that's one key aspect of the strategy, as well as it's a resonating theme, in most of the national African AI policies and draft documents that we find. We are saying we want to retain data, African data, we want digital sovereignty, but we also want regional cooperation, and we also want foreign direct investment. We therefore need specific laws that would outline clearly what the terms and conditions will be for such kind of partnerships, for such kind of cooperation, for such kind of business adventure. We also need to look at.
I'm going to give you another minute just because you're running out of time.
Okay.
With Idem.
Oh yeah. Oh, great. Okay. So I will just wrap it up. I think that like I said, it's a beautiful piece of document, but enforcement, implementation is a serious matter that needs to be considered. And for me, one way to drive that, beyond just having that document, is to have particular law, a specific law that determines or outlines obligations, responsibilities, rights, and remedies. I think I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you
Edema.
very much.
Yes, you're right on enforceability. This is the first piece of work that has given a lot of the responsibility to implement to go to the Data Protection Authority, which is very, very new. And so at this point, I want to invite my final speaker, who is Aqua Mensa. Aqua Mensa, please pronounce your name again so that we don't butcher it like I just did. She's a Ghanaian lawyer and registered foreign lawyer with a master's in ICT and intellectual property law. She specializes in AI governance, technology risk, and digital regulation in emerging economies with comparative research on the EU AI Act, which is relevant for jurisdictions like Ghana. She contributes to policy discussions on responsible AI, data governance, and technology-driven development. So, Aqua, I'm curious about the threshold on risk, comparing to, EU framework on high risk. Ghana seems like does not classify that on what's high risk. It's in my view, it's a very investment-focused document. What would you say about this? And also, what are your general thoughts around this strategy?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. So my name is Akuya Boachiwa Mensah. Yes. Yes.
Aqua is easy. I'll stick with it.
Yes, let's stick with that. That's perfect. Okay, so looking at Ghana's national AI strategy, you can see that, as you earlier said, the country has vision of being Africa's leader in terms of a perfect AI ecosystem. But all that the strategy seems to look like is we know what to do, but the point is, how are we going to do it? In order to ensure that this strategy is effectively implemented, there is something that I think we are missing, is to create a trustworthy AI ecosystem. Because before somebody can be convinced that I need to engage myself in AI job, for instance, as the strategy aimed to achieve, that it will get more use into the AI sector in terms of the job market. Also using AI in the various health sectors, agricultural sectors, and financial sectors to create that confidence and trustworthiness to accept that, okay, now we are ready to build an AI ecosystem. There is the need to have a legal framework or a legal structure, as the earlier speaker mentioned, so that people will have a legal backing, have the capacity to challenge when their AI output is going wrong, or maybe a decision outcome of AI is going wrong. So to that extent, that is where I have always advocated that Ghana needs to develop a regulatory framework on its AI use, learning from the EU. The reason why the EU, to me, it's important that we look at is it is the first ever organization that came up with EU AI Act. Looking at the European Union and its regions, you can see that as far back as the 90s, creating a machine-based system to behave like humans has already existed, and it has gone through phases. And these technologically advanced countries have experienced the phases. They've been able to identify that, no, this machine-based system is coming with a threat, with a harm, with risk that we need to regulate, for which reason they brought up with the EU AI Act. And they decided that, why don't we assess the AI systems and then categorize them based on the threat and the risk that it comes up with? That is why when you look at the EU Act, it has the high-risk AI, the prohibited, the minimal, to the extent that they are saying that if you come up with an AI system that distorts the vulnerable person's behavior, that AI is prohibited. If you come up with an AI that is likely to harm the behavior of individuals, we are not going to prohibit it, but we are going to consider it as a high-risk AI that needs a regulatory oversight, that needs to go through procedures before you can launch such AI system. So in terms of Ghana's national strategy, that is where we miss the point. How are we going to assess the type of AI being used? And based on the assessment, how are we going to categorize that this is safe for human consumption? Because when we are talking about human rights, we're also talking about right to consumer safety, which is very important. Ghana's strategy is looking at ensuring that we use AI to protect and promote the well-being of Ghanaians, which is perfect. That is ensuring the 1992 Constitution of right to social and economic well-being. Absolutely, 100%. But my question is, how do you safeguard the consumer safety? How do you ensure that what the consumer is consuming is not going to affect them? And that is where we miss the point in assessing which type of AI are we coming up with and how are we going to control that AI that we are coming up with, and not just infusing it into our health sectors, not just infusing it into agriculture sectors, not just infusing it with our financial sectors. So I believe that it is important that we consider and say, look at the EU Act and try and come up with a specific regulatory system. When I listened to the previous speaker, Dr. Preeti, I was excited when she was so passionate about we having something specific towards this AI use in Ghana, because it is coming with threats, it is coming with risk. Even though Ghana is aiming at relying on existing laws, but with the risk and the threat that comes with AI, in my opinion, it will not be safe for us to rely on these existing laws, because these existing laws cover specific technological risk, not AI risk. And so it will be dangerous for us to rely on it in controlling risk when it comes to AI.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Akwa. And you raised such pertinent issues on the legal structure and how that needs to look like. Also, a trustworthy AI ecosystem. We need that. I don't know if anyone feels like Ghana is very optimistic around AI. And, Kenyan workers are looking at Ghana and wondering, do you know how we've been harmed by artificial intelligence? For example, the data annotators and labelers, some of them went to court and sued Meta. And Meta then moved to Ghana to avoid all these risk issues. So it tells you that Ghana ideally may not be really, they may be taking, the big tech companies at their word and actually not punishing them for these harms. So we must talk about harms and what's going to happen. I like that they introduced the concept of harms on justice. Because then nobody's going to prison because they used an AI tool that made them, falsely sentenced in that sense. At this point, I'd like to get your questions and your comments. I have lost track of the chat, but there's one Q&A, somebody who's answered a question on the Q&A tab, so I'll read that. But if you have a comment or a question, please feel free to lift your hand and, we'll, upgrade you to be able to speak on your mic, ask your question, and let us know exactly what your thoughts are. We do have an anonymous attendee who said that even as African government scales and implements AI, when the offender is also the government or the regulators, systems may scale, but trust is ultimately bounded by the least ethical actor within them, as we have seen in the automated messages from Shuru, which is Kenya's tax authority AI-powered chatbot to taxpayers, its customers, and its largest asset base. AI can support your strengths when used intentionally, but it can also amplify your weaknesses when used unthinkingly. It can cost you an opportunity to connect with your largest support base by alienating them. And so automation does not just replace the discipline that forms sound structure, systems, and judgment. And I think Ghana has something to learn about its new, GhanaChat. How they're going to use GhanaChat to the people that will be using these tools. I see Kambale Musavuli. That sounds like Kenyan name or Zimbabwe name. Please let us know what you're thinking at this point. Your mic is on. You have about 35 seconds.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask a question to the panelists around the strategy based on my understanding of the technology, right? At the moment, I believe that China and the US are the top countries as it relates to AI technology. What I want to know is, in our thinking of laws and implementation, are we looking into what China is doing? in terms of law, looking at the case against Didi in China, holding them accountable for AI algorithm, or we have much more focus on looking Europe or the US on what to do as it relates to the AI strategy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kambale. That's an interesting question, very useful. If you look at, if you go on our YouTube channel, we talked about Kenya and we compared Kenya to China. And we came up with China has very sector-specific regulations without setting up like new authorities. And so it's a very good, episode to watch. Lawyers Hub is on YouTube. You can find it there. This is to everyone. And then use the same sort of measures against that. But our panelists can let us know what they think. I want to bring in my next question from Onoke John. I can't see the last name, but please proceed.
Thank you very much. My name is Valentine Onoke from Uganda. I'm an advocate by profession, and mine is just comments. So I think Ghana's policy is one of those few that are trying to speak about data sovereignty and how to actually move the discussion to data sovereignty. And this is very important because when you look at most countries, they are checking only a regulatory aspect, which is not advisable because when you look at artificial intelligence, it's not primarily the software. There is the hardware part, and that's where you find the data centers, the GPUs, the microchips. Now, how can African nations ensure that they have an aspect of sovereignty over this infrastructure? It's key infrastructure, just like you see roads, railways. We need that infrastructure, and I'm actually happy to see it mentioned in the policy for Ghana, though there is no policy direction in that line, but even a mere mention of it is a step in the right direction. We need sovereignty in that end too, because software keeps on changing and upgrading. Within this year alone, we have seen GPT models being released every time. So how does a nation move to that level of data sovereignty? I also managed to notice that the National Information Technology Agency in Ghana has built tier 3 data centers, and these are connected to commercial banks. Now, that is a very good move. But now, if this is already happening, it means that commercial institutions have access to identity and information data of individuals. And it means that this access can be implemented or used by artificial intelligence for commercial benefits. Now, on top of having these regulatory policies, there should be a policy direction to ensure such integration does not affect the right of individuals, any other right, because there is classifying, but you're already integrating commercial institutions without any policy regulation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Onoke Valentine. Those are interesting comments. The panel is going to get to them. And Melissa Ninsima says, I cannot help but think of the gaps in ESG considerations of this strategy. It is very compute intensive and mentions how AI can be adopted to improve climate efforts, yet silent on its strategies to mitigate the climate-related impact of AI resulting from energy use. It is especially worrying in light of the enforcement loopholes. So I think the enforcement that they were really looking at was data. But the other sort of worker-related rights, AI harms on children, I think that was not really looked into. And I think as we talked about the different phases of AI strategies, and sort of this phase of Zimbabwe, South Africa, and then Ghana, and Mozambique is in the process. We hope that we can discuss Mozambique's framework as it's actually open now in terms of public participation. So we see that it's getting better and better. People are learning from the mistakes of those who did the very first national AI strategies, especially from Northern Africa. But where we cannot enforce these things, there is a problem, and we need to look at enforcement. How does that look like for these particular strategies? There are comments in the chat that I think warrant us to, talk about it and see, why are we comparing to the US and to the EU? It's an important question to ask. Which economy is actually thriving on artificial intelligence, and what can we borrow from them? I think that was a very interesting, comment. Yolande Yaira said, one of the key reasons for developing a national AI strategy, instead of immediately introducing strict AI-specific legislation, is to create an enabling environment that encourages innovation and ecosystem growth. Excessive regulation at an early stage can unintentionally stifle innovation and discourage startups, researchers, and industry players from participating in the AI ecosystem. This approach, therefore, is to promote responsible innovation while gradually strengthening governance structure. So this is why dedicated offices and institutions are being established or empowered to oversee AI development and ensure that AI systems do not evolve without accountability or frameworks. So those are some of the comments that I'm able to see. And, I also think that this is a lesson to governments. Please post your AI strategy as you launch them on the website. Don't assume everyone follows you on WhatsApp or follows you on LinkedIn. There are people who are, this platform agnostic, and it's important for us to think about that. So many things have come up on enforceability, on reality, resources, especially energy resources. And I'd like to just come back to my panelists for them to let us know, what are your final comments and what you see about this strategy? What can we do about them? Dennis Ramfomane, thank you for always joining us. He talks about Egypt's strategy 2.0, which is to 2025. It's more of a comparator than anything. Nothing on natural language processing, nothing on small language models, no real Afrocentric solutions for these African problems. Are we actually solving Africa's problems, or we just simply copying the West and having this done by consultants? So let's come to our panelists. I'm sorry we've gone a bit over the time. We usually say it's 1:15, but the 15 is silent. Today it will be 1:10 and the 10 is silent. So let's start from Fifi.
All right, I'll try and make this very quick. So I think I'll touch on the one of the comments on compute. Again, the strategy talks a lot about the compute divide and the gap. It does mention the fact that they are going to make use of renewable energy or solar, but then it brings the conversation that even though we are going to have solar implemented for some of these data centers, the consumers are still going to have unreliable power issues. So how are we going to consume or leverage on these solutions from the data centers when the individual consumers are also going to have issues accessing reliable power? Regarding hardware, there is a lot of demand for the hardware accelerators or the GPUs and TPUs that are required for these. And if we don't really own, we need to. I think the strategy is a bit more of places us in the position of being more of consumers. I don't see any strategy around being producers in the entire pipeline, right? It's more of, okay, we'll partner with these people, we will purchase this, we'll buy this, but I don't see anywhere. Again, I've not read it thoroughly, but I don't see anywhere that says that we're actually going to produce this. Let's say, I'm being very ambitious here. We're going to produce this chip or GPU or whatever it is, so that beyond Africa, we're also going to compete globally within the entire AI landscape. And that also lacking, because if we're just going to keep consuming, it's going to be a problem, because these GPUs and stuff are very expensive. And then it brings you to the models and all of that. Are you going to, fine tune? I think you mentioned that. Are you going to build from scratch? What is the entire ecosystem going to look like, right? Are you going to enable other people? Or are you just trying to do everything by yourself at the end of the day?
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Fifi. I think that's very useful. For Africa to win, we must have homegrown solutions. Otherwise, we'll just be consumers of these particular strategies. Thank you so much, Fifi Bado. We appreciate you and the technical work that you do. And so to our second speaker, Dr. Preeti, do you have any comments, closing comments, especially from, there's a lot of comments on the chat. What strikes it out for you and for the questions as well?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, I do. I'll quickly respond to the comments about why we have to make comparisons with the EU and the US, right? Or even with China. I like to refer to them as the big three tech regions or countries, if you may, if you refer to China and the US. So when it comes to development issues, you want to look at what has happened before you or what has gone ahead of you, who has gone ahead of you. You want to consider what they have done, what they are thinking of doing, and then you want to look at how that could inform what you intend to do within your region. Okay, the EU already has an act which is majorly risk-based, right? And so they are looking at essentially the protection of their citizens and the users of these tech companies, tech products and AI products and what have you, right? So the EU has set a precedent. The US allows a lot of innovation to occur within the region, right? Of course, they have laws, and of course, they are way ahead when it comes to enforcement. More than most African countries. Now, what that tells us is that these are precedents. If you are setting up something within Africa, you need to consider Africa's cultural, geographical context and nuances, and then pick some of the lessons from these major countries or regions. So look at what the EU has done. Obviously, your AI legislation should have some form of protective mechanisms embedded in it. So you should have some provisions for the protection of rights of users of these AI systems. So you're not just you're not just deploying AI, or you're not just setting up an AI infrastructure within your region without necessarily considering the harms that may result to your citizens or to the users of the AI systems. Right? Somebody talked about ESG considerations in Ghana's AI national strategy, and that's why I say we do need a specific law. Ghana needs a specific law to address those issues. Yeah. So if you do not have a specific law, you have companies and tech companies coming on board, deploying AI systems, causing job displacement, causing environmental damage, and sometimes you are handicapped. You cannot hold them liable or responsible because, of course, what you have has no binding provisions. It's a strategy document or a policy that has just aspirations and it's more like a roadmap. Okay, so those provisions do not say what will be done if this happens, who is going to be liable, what payments will be made, what remedies are available. And so that's why I think, and this is my last comment, please, Linda.
Yeah, I have to throw you out now.
We do not need. Yeah. Oh, just 1 minute. The person who says, why do we need to start off with a specific legislation? We do not need that first because we need to explore. What people think most of the time is when you have legislative documents or laws for innovative sectors, they just think and say, oh, it's going to stifle regulation or stifle innovation. No, regulation do not necessarily stifle innovation. If you do your studies very well, you look at the statistics, and that's why you should borrow examples from countries that have gone ahead, advanced economies. What you need to do is you feature in your local legislation provisions and terms that would be beneficial to innovation and as well protective of your citizens. So you balance innovation and you balance rights. You do not have a law. You should not have an AI law at this point in time.
Cut you short now.
Okay.
Because we have to go.
Thank
you.
Thank
you so much.
Sorry, I just get very passionate about this conversation. Thank you so much.
I understand. Thanks so much. We are really pressed for time. And this is always a very short Monday call because Monday has a lot. But when you start here, you learn so much. So we are grateful that everyone could join us. Akwa, you've suffered the misfortune on being the last one on this one. So you have 1 minute to wrap up every thought that you've had on this call.
Okay, I think almost everything that I wanted to say, Dr. Preeti has touched on it. on the comments of, adopting AI Act from EU, China, and USA, we are not saying we are going to do a copy and paste kind of
Yeah.
regulation. We are going to consider our culture, our social, political, the level of our technology to come up with an AI Act. We are not just going to copy and paste because in terms of technological level, we are not at par. So we cannot copy and paste their, regulations. And also on the idea of AI Act going to hold on or stifle innovation, we can combine EU, for instance, and the UK. The UK adopt a principle-based approach, more like encouraging innovation without really considering the risk. EU is considering the risk rather than just coming up with anything. We can combine the two, infuse it in our, policies and strategies and AI Act, and it will work for us. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Akwa. And thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate all the conversations that have gone through this past hour. And we must say that there are great things in this particular strategy. I like the optimism in Ghana. I love Accra. I like the food, the heat, the chili, everything, the dance. Ghana is an amazing place, and we hope that this works. We hope that big tech does not take over your ecosystem because it's not great for startups. This is the first strategy I've seen that is very clear on the companies they're going to reach out to, foreign companies. Please don't be overtaken by foreign companies. Look for the African startups that we can actually build so that we build at home. I hope diaspora comes back and build, that there will be incentives and there will be opportunities for the diaspora to actually come home and build. I also want to mention that the GhanaChat is an impressive piece of legislation. Empowering the Data Protection Authority is a step forward, but we must have enforcement. We must look at harms. We must learn from South Africans' draft and Zimbabwe on AI ombudsperson on what they could actually do for the ecosystem. We must look at digital workers in Kenya suffering the harms of artificial intelligence. We must also look at cultural values because Ubuntu, as Zimbabwe has shown us, that it's important in terms of culture, that we adopt this culture. I also want to mention that Ghana is really great in terms of language. You have shown us that it's important for local language, for us to have natural language processing. Ghana is leading on this strategy on compute and looking at what does compute means. You have electricity. People don't have. I'm looking at you Nigerians. What does this mean and what do we do in this particular sense? So I would want to say that this was a really amazing conversation, and every Monday, 12 o'clock Nairobi time, we talk about artificial intelligence strategies. If you want to learn, if this is the year of learning for you and you want to upskill, this is free. Come and let's engage, talk to each other on the chat. We're going to have this for a few minutes. You can be able to connect with someone on LinkedIn or on their website. So we'll not end this call immediately. We'll give you time to look at the chat, especially for our speakers, to see what people said, even as they were speaking. I also want to mention that Lawyers Hub is working on a lot of these AI strategies. You can go to aipolicy.africa. If you're on this call and you're African in money, support our work. And you can also support our work by just going online and resharing things from our LinkedIn, our website, lawyershub.org. We want to thank you, and I want to thank the Lawyers Hub team for making it possible, for us to have this conversation. Thank you, Ken and Louisa, for making this episode happen. I also want to thank the minister. I was in touch with the Minister of Ghana, ICT, Honorable Sam George. He's been to our Africa Law Tech Festival before he became famous. And so I have the ear of the minister. So I'm going to tell him what we think on this specific call. But I want to thank you for making it happen. Come to Africa Law Tech Festival. You might be the next minister because everybody who comes here, even when they were young, now they're running Africa. So I hope that you run Africa and that your career makes an impact. All these things we are saying about Africa and making Africa home. Please fight big tech for us. Get the opportunity and make sure that African startups actually scale. So Fifi, Bado, Dr. Preeti, and Akwa, thank you for joining us on this conversation. It will be available on YouTube at Africa Lawyers Hub Africa. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely week.